Today, we're going to be learning some of the more important tools for really maximizing what you can do in Adobe Illustrator, specifically drawing tools. And within that, the pen tool is the big grand finale with these drawing tools we're going to do. We're going to start off with the pencil tool. Now, the pencil tool by default is actually underneath the shaper tool. So the shaper tool is a tool that you can use to draw things. And if I draw a crappy triangle, it'll make it into a nice triangle. If I draw a crappy circle, it'll make it into a less crappy circle. But it has a lot of limitations. It really is a simplified tool. But underneath the shaper tool, we have the pencil tool. And if I double click on the pencil tool, I'll actually get a bunch of options, how smooth I want it, different things like that. And there's a lot you can do with the pencil tool, but for the sake of today, I just want you to get a feel for how this tool works. It basically is going to draw out what you draw. And depending on your level of smoothness you've chosen, it will vary your results. Now, you're going to notice that it's really hard to get a lot of precision, especially if we're drawing with our mouse or with a trackpad, of getting that precision. And so the pencil tool can be helpful if we're wanting to get a hand-drawn look and we have a steady hand, but it's going to be pretty limiting when it comes to like really creating something specific. All right. You'll notice that as you draw with the pencil tool, when you come back to the beginning point, you'll get that little circle there, and that completes that path. So let's take a look at the paintbrush tool next. The paintbrush tool is going to work pretty similar to the pencil tool in that as you draw, it's going to pretty much keep what you have. If you double click on the paintbrush tool, you'll get those same set of options that you can explore around with. But the big difference is with the pencil tool, it's just putting a 1-point normal stroke on it. But with the paintbrush tool, notice that now my stroke says 1 point, but the brush is now a 5-point round. So it's a little different, but it's going to do the same thing in essence. And so it's just going to be that path that it draws, nothing too crazy. One thing with the paintbrush tools, you'll notice that it doesn't try and complete the shape. All right, the pencil tool, it will, if you come back to the beginning, it'll prompt to complete the shape. But with the paintbrush tool, this shape's not technically completed. So if I go into my view, you'll see that shape's still, my outline view is still not totally correct there. Okay, so just something to note with the paintbrush tool in terms of its limitations. Now, underneath the paintbrush tool, we have the blob brush tool, and the blob brush tool is going to look the same as the paintbrush tool when we're drawing, but it actually functions quite differently. So with the paintbrush tool, I have these paths, right? I select my brushing and it's a path, and then the brush is around it. With the blob brush, notice that it just created a shape of that. So instead of being a path, this is actually just a shape. So if I get the blob brush and I paint this little circle in, it's going to be just that shape. Whereas if I use the normal paintbrush and paint this little circle in, if I select it, you're going to see that's just a path. Whereas this is that actual shape. So there is a very distinct difference between the two. So we'll go ahead and delete that, and we'll back out here, and we'll finish our blob brush line here. Okay. So we'll draw this out. Pretty rad. So when I connect things in the blob brush, it is going to combine them into one shape, and I won't be able to change that quite as easily if I needed to. With the paintbrush, I can get the direct selection tool and I can move any of those anchor points. With the blob brush, I can move the line. If I grab an anchor point, it's going to change the thickness of the line. It's not going to be able to change that line itself. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at the pen tool. All right. And the pen tool is like the ultimate tool for Adobe Illustrator. And you will get frustrated by the pen tool. I recognize that, but recognize that mastering the pen tool is tricky. Once you have it mastered, everything becomes a lot easier in Adobe Illustrator. And so we want to really dive into that when we're working here in Illustrator. And so with the pen tool, we'll start simple. the basic concept of the pen tool is when I click, it creates a point, an anchor point. And then when I click again, it creates another anchor point and will connect those two anchor points together. All right. So every time I click, it just is going to create a new anchor point along my path. You'll notice that my fill is doing some weird things. It's just filling in that shape. I don't really want to fill in a shape. It's because I just use the blob brush that is doing that. I'm going to flip that. So instead it's just creating a line, and maybe to make it a little easier for us, I'll even make my line a little thicker. Now, once I've made my points, I can hit the escape key and it will end that path and I can start a new one. Okay. So again, I'm just going to click on these points and you can see how when it comes to recreating these shapes exactly or really close to exactly how they were, the pen tool works fantastic. All right. And so in that context, the pen tool is a super, super powerful tool because it's going to create exactly what we want. Whereas with the paintbrush or the pencil tool, there's more limitations to how that final design is going to come out. Now, so far, you might be sitting there, Mr. Roth, like that wasn't too bad. I don't know why people would say the pen tool is tricky. This is why. So I'm going to start creating a path here now. So that bottom path is easy, but if I click on the next anchor point, you're going to notice that it's not going to work for there, okay? If I come in here and I start making a bunch of points, it's not going to be curved still. So with the pen tool, when we want a curved line, I'm going to click and hold down with my mouse, and I'm going to drag the mouse while I'm clicking down still. And that's going to create a curve, and it gives me these two handles. We've kind of seen the handles before when we were making circles and things like that. And these handles are going to dictate the curve of my shape. So as I come up to the next point, you'll notice that there's a curve slightly going down, but if I click and drag more, I can get those handles to help line that up more correctly to that shape. And so as I work through this, this shape is designed to be pretty simple with that. Now with the pen tool, if I come over here, you're going to see I've given you the little anchor points on this shape here. And so now you can go in and you're going to just start drawing all of these little curves. Now, as you do that, you can choose to use the anchor points given or just make your own. However you can get it to work is fine by me. All right. I'm going to just skip over that just for your sake because you don't need to watch me do this whole thing. And so with the pen tool, as we use these curves, we have a lot more control. Let's say, though, that I make a curve and it's not quite right and I need to edit it. While you're in the pen tool, if you hold down the Alt key, your tool is actually going to change. And now you can actually go in and modify the handle. You can modify those angles so that you can create the curve how you need it for your shape. Okay. So just something to keep in mind with the pen tool is you can hold down Alt as you're working to create your shapes. Okay. And so once you do this, I want you to explore and just get practice with the pen tool. So go in, start making some of these shapes and just practice. The pen tool is a pain in the butt to learn, but is super, super helpful once you've learned it. And so the best way to learn it is to practice it. Now, a couple of other things I wanted to show you guys with the pen tool. So I have this cloud here. This one's a little trickier because you're going to notice if I click and drag and I make this first point, I have an issue because my curve doesn't want to go at all the way I have it. That's where holding down the Alt key and changing the angle of that handle can be helpful. Now, you don't have to do that after the fact. You can actually do that while you're drawing it. So while I'm drawing the shape, I can actually move my handle and change that curve while I'm drawing the shape. So just something to keep in mind as you're working here with the pen tool. All right. In addition to that, there's one other useful pen tool trick I'll show you guys. So I'm going to basically not do the cloud this way. I'm going to get my pen tool and I'm just going to click each part where I think I'm going to need a path. And so right now, this isn't looking so good. But I've made my cloud. Oops, I didn't click on the beginning point. Holy cow, come on. There we go. I've made my cloud. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get underneath the pen tool, there's a tool called the anchor point tool. And so the anchor point tool is going to allow me to actually go in and change that curve. It's just like when I was holding down Alt as I was using the normal pen tool. And so as I do that, I can just pull these out like so and get that curve to match how I want my shape to look. And so this can just allow you to create some of these more complex shapes a little easier, because you can just go in and kind of cheat, in a way, your way around. You have to do some guesswork where you think things are going to land. But as you do that, you'll see that you've kind of, made the job a little easier for you by doing that. And so again, we can get the anchor point tool, and then we can just kind of curve some of these in. And I'm just rushing through this and pull some of these out. And while you're not going to get as clean of a shape as if you were to use the pen tool normally, sometimes you can get a cleaner shape, but you can start emulating those. So what I want you to do for the pen tool is go through and create all of these different shapes here. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to submit that. And then you can go on to the pen tool game. It's bezier.method.ac, and you can get that pen tool practice there as well. So take a look. The pen tool will be a lifesaver for you once you learn how to do it. So put that work in to learn it, because you can see how we have way more control with the pen tool compared to a lot of these other tools here in Adobe Illustrator.